pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moment of silence, please. Thank you. Ms. Lawrence, roll call, please.
Mr. Perminsky. Mr. Haas. Ms. Hauk. Here. Mr. Kelleher.
Here.
Mr. Perry.
Here.
Ms. Sedman. Here. Mr. Schnee.
Present.
Mr. Urban.
Here.
Mr. Vogt.
Here.
Ms. Wakus. Present. Mr. McGinley.
Present.
10 of 11 present.
10 of 11 present. And this evening we're starting with a public hearing on the proposed ordinance that was submitted at our last meeting and introduced. And later on this evening will be part of the agenda in the voting session. So we have 3 people who have indicated they wish to speak in regard to the public hearing. And we'll begin with Mr. Ola.
Good evening, folks. Every once in a while you get into a tunnel and all you see is flat black paint and nothing at the end of the tunnel. Having experienced that firsthand one time, thanks to one of the leading medical centers in the region, it's a frightening thought. Once in a while, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think what Ms. Hauk has brought to the table is a first small step towards compliance with, let's call them, federal regulations of a sort that the county was supposed to incorporate in 2001. Here it is 17 years later, 17 long years, and thanks to some courageous effort, this is in front of council. I hope that people have the courage to take that first step so that we're no longer as we take continuous steps in the future along these lines, that we won't no longer be the laughing stock of other states. They look at how we do our finances. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Manoski.
Yeah, I'd just like to give you something to think about on that registration fee.
Now, this is a public hearing on the proposed amendment. It's on the registration fee.
Oh, I thought this was...
This is a public hearing at 6:01. Hopefully, we'll be started with the voting meeting, and then that would be the time for the registration fee.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, so it'll be a couple minutes if you can.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Mr. Griffith?
Good evening. First of all, I have a question I'd like to ask. If these public meetings are being approved by the council, the minutes of the public hearings, I don't see any public hearings by this council. They're being recorded by the secretary and approved by this council. Is that protocol for the council?
I think you're correct. I don't think we have ever had that, Mr. Griffith.
I think they should be done. It's a public meeting. Council should approve the minutes of everybody who speaks at this meeting. and it's not being done. Hasn't been done. So if you could consider that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay. Under the public hearing for the ordinance, I have some concerns. Back in June of 2017, myself, Brian, Ed, a couple other folks came to this council and begged, practically pleaded with this council to stop this process. It was done illegally in our estimation as citizens against the charter. We were told that it wasn't illegal, it wasn't a violation of the charter, and nothing was done. We again came back and asked the same question again and said, this should be done. The manager should be reprimanded. There should be a vote of council to approve this contract. Nothing was done. Now the ADP contract's gone through. We spent over $200,000 in expenses, and now we want to stop ADP. I think the horse is out of the barn at this point. We're going to throw $200,000 away on an ADP contract at this point. This should have been done back in June of last year. This council should have voted to support this contract or not support this contract back last year when it was identified that the manager overstepped his bounds according to the charter. Now clearly, the solicitor's office, who gives advice to the manager, who's hired by the manager, told the manager that he wasn't overstepping his bounds, so council backed off. That's not the problem here. The manager should have been reprimanded for overstepping his bounds and violating the charter back in 2017. The question that we have before us today is about an ordinance to stop the manager from doing it again. This council doesn't have that power. The charter is clear. It gives the manager the power to approve contracts. Council needs to put language in this and amend this ordinance, and I applaud Linda for her effort. But I think the ordinance should say that the manager has to tell council what he's doing over $25,000 as a discussion item, not as approval. Council can't stop the manager for spending money if you guys give him the money. If you want to stop him from spending money on contracts, take his money away. That's the power of council, is legislative, to take the money away. If you don't take his money away, he can spend it on anything he wants, according to the charter. That's what the charter says. You can't change that unless you want to put it on the ballot, which I would suggest would be a good idea, to say anything over $25,000 has to be approved by council. But you can't violate the charter this way. This is not the way it should be done. Council should have the approval process to say to the manager, it's over $25,000, you have the money, we gave it to you. All we want to know is you tell us what you're spending it for, so we know that next year when we have to do the budget, we can stop you from having the money again. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are the only two slips that I have, but there might be other people who would like to speak at the public hearing. Mr. Gustitis, I thought you might want to speak. Want to step to the podium, please?
At my age, you got to say something.
My age has nothing to do about saying something, though, Mr. Gustitis.
Okay, we're talking about the amendment relative to the code and all of the other things that go along with it in relationship to the 25,000 up to 75 as a form of approval. Okay, if the charter says one thing, all right, that's what you go by, but that can be changed relative to what is necessary to maintain a watchdog on how the money is spent or how it's shifted relative to things that are in the budget, all right, that then are deleted for some reason or another that you want to use for other purposes, all right? This amendment will do that. It'll give you the watchdog approach relative to where and what the money is being used for, all right? Many times these things happen and you get into pet projects for this, that, or whatever reason, or somebody's scratching your back or whatever, all right? This should put some type of restraint on how the money is used without formal approval, okay? So I recommend, you know, the amending of this, and it should be done, right? Because we had trouble in the past, as you have known. Money was spent years ago, got us into a debt problem, all right, which we're still trying to get out of, and we don't need any more shenanigans, right? We've had all the shenanigans we need over the last 30, 40 years. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in regards to the public hearing? Anyone else? If not, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mr. Keller, do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Wakes, all in favor, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition, any abstentions? None heard. Motion carries. Thank you. 6:01, we'll have the voting session. Mr. Nuski, okay? Just have the two.